28 years, almost 1100 chapters. That was how long ago Dracula Mihawk was introduced to us, the strongest, the pinnacle of strength, literally introduced to us with him sinking 50 ships with nothing but a single blade. The man who stands at the peak of this world, the world's strongest swordsman, Hawk-Eye Mihawk. While talking One Piece, debating One Piece, even having a light chat about One Piece, 99% of people will come to an agreement about one thing and one thing only. Mihawk belongs to a category of his own. In a way, every other major figure in One Piece is in motion. Luffy is chasing the One Piece. Zoro is chasing the title of world's strongest swordsman. Blackbeard is accumulating devil fruits and rewriting the rules of what a pirate can be. Shanks is maneuvering pieces on a board only he can fully see. The admirals are enforcing an institution they believe in, or at least perform believing in. The Revolutionary Army is dismantling the world government piece by piece. Even the characters who seem still, who seem like they've stepped back from the chase, are still moving in their own direction, towards something they haven't reached yet. Mihawk is not. Mihawk reached his horizon before the story started. He is the only character in the entire series introduced at the top. Well, not counting Roger since he's dead. A character who's not climbing toward the summit, not approaching it, not contesting it, already there, already done. And the series uses that singular position to ask a question it never quite asks anyone else. What do you do with yourself when you've finished? When there is no one left to surpass, no rival worth raising your real blade for, no dream left to chase because the dream is already complete. What does a person become? The answer, in Mihawk's case, is a man who sits in a ruined castle on a dark island and reads bounty posters. And somehow, that is the most quietly depressing character portrait in the series. This is not a video about whether Mihawk is powerful. This is not a power scaling video. Zoro's dream collapses if Mihawk is not real. The title means nothing if the man holding it is not the ceiling. The interesting question is what strength did to him after there was no one left to surpass. He is the only character in One Piece who has already won. Mihawk is One Piece's most complete portrait of a man who has arrived and found out that arrival is not what he thought it would be. He reached the summit. He became the world's strongest swordsman. He held the title without interruption before the story began. And the summit, it turns out, was not glory. It was not fulfillment. It was not even peace. It was a high, cold place with no one else standing there. So the real question of Mihawk is not, can anyone beat him? The real question is, what do you do with yourself when there is nothing left to chase? Mihawk's answer, for most of the series, is devastatingly simple. You wait. And a disclaimer before I fully dive into this video. There are a lot of missing pieces, and information we have yet to know of Mihawk. Oda has been blueballing us for over 20 years, so there will be assumptions and unconfirmed theories that I will be talking about, which I will be trying to tackle throughout segments of this video. Anyway, let's begin. Mihawk arrives in chapter 50. He arrives on a coffin-shaped boat. He is wearing the largest sword in the series on his back. He is alone. No crew, no companions, no subordinates present. Mihawk enters as a man with no visible structure around him at all. Just himself, and the debris of an entire fleet he sank single-handedly. He found Dawn Creek somewhere between the East Blue and the Grand Line, settled whatever account he needed to settle, and then kept sailing. He did not linger. He had no reason to. This is an entrance designed to communicate one thing above all else. The rules that apply to every other character in this story do not apply to this one. Let's be precise about what world's strongest swordsman actually means before we go any further. Because it is very easy to hear that title and nod past it. It is not a regional title. It is not a title contested within the Marines, or held within a specific crew, or acknowledged only by people in a given area. It is the single absolute superlative, available in the swordsmanship category, held without caveat, acknowledged by every serious fighter in the story. Introduced to us as being the man who stands at the peak of this world. Whitebeard, who is described as the strongest man in the world, acknowledged Mihawk's duels with Shanks as legendary. Marco, Jozu, the entire Marineford war machine. Nobody contested it. He is the ceiling, and he has been the ceiling for years before the story even begins. The critical question I want to open up this video with is this. What is the psychological architecture of a man who has already done the thing? Who has already answered the question that every other swordsman in the series is still trying to answer? Mihawk is not in the middle of his journey. He is at its end. And the story begins after he arrived, which means everything we see of him is a portrait of what comes after completion, not what comes before it. And the honest question here is Mihawk satisfied? You might think that's a dumb question to be asked, but really think about it. The evidence suggests consistently, across every appearance in the series, that he is not. And the first great paradox of his character is precisely this. The man who has everything that the series' most powerful characters are chasing does not appear to be a man who has peace. He appears to be a man who has very precisely constructed the conditions of a life designed to look like peace. and who is not entirely fooled by his own construction. One Piece is a story about dreams. Every other powerful or relevant character in this series is still running towards something. Mihawk stopped running before the story started. So let's start at the very beginning of what we know of Hawkeye. In SBS 108, Oda was directly asked about Mihawk's history as the Marine Hunter, the epithet he held before joining the Shichibukai. His answer was that Mihawk held a deep grudge against the Marines after experiencing a major betrayal. In Oda's exact words, as translated from the SBS, Mihawk is a person who holds a grudge against the Marines in the past, and has experienced a great betrayal. In the sense of solitude, he's just like Crocodile, who doesn't trust people, and there is a part of him getting tired of life. The Shichibukai position gave him something specific. Being a member of the Shichibukai means he won't be chased by the Marines. That way, he will have peace. So that's why he became a member. This is where we have to be careful. The betrayal backstory is not fully explained. We do not know who betrayed him. We do not know whether the betrayal came directly from the Marines, from someone connected to them, from a pirate, from a friend, from an institution, or from a rival. We do not know whether the betrayal created the Marine grudge or whether both facts sit beside each other in a more complicated past. Mihawk was known as the Marine Hunter before his warlord tenure, meaning he actively hunted Marine personnel as a freelance pirate, enough to earn a named epithet and a significant bounty. He later accepted the warlord title, which would pardon and protect him, specifically to stop being pursued and to buy solitude. From these facts, a portrait of the pre-Castle Mihawk begins to form. Someone or something connected to the Marines betrayed him in a way severe enough to turn him from whatever he was before into a man who spent years systematically hunting their soldiers. This was not casual piracy. It was directed, it was personal, and it went on long enough to define him. What version of Mihawk existed before the betrayal? Who was the Marine Hunter before the grudge was partially settled and the warlord title was purchased? There was a person in Mihawk's past who still had reasons to be in motion, who hunted with direction, who was engaged with the world rather than merely observing it from a ruined castle. And somewhere between that person and the man reading bounty posters on Kuraigana Island, something was taken from him. Mihawk's origin beyond these confirmed bullet points is completely unknown. No childhood shown, no formative moment dramatized, no family named or pictured. We receive the product without the process. What is left is a man who chose solitude. But he had Shanks. Their rivalry is described by Whitebeard as legendary. Duels that echoed across the Grand Line. Clashes between two young pirates at the absolute peak of their generation. Repeated encounters that always ended without a decisive resolution. Shanks was the only person Mihawk considered a genuine rival. The only person worth raising Yoru for, as a real contest between equals. The only person in the world who could make the title feel genuinely threatened. And then, Shanks ended up crippling himself saving Luffy. Mihawk's response to this is the single most revealing canonical moment about his character in the entire first half of the manga. He traveled to find Shanks shortly after, not to challenge him, but to show him Luffy's first bounty poster. To bring news. That is not how rivals interact. That is how one person maintains a connection to someone they no longer have any competitive reason to seek out. Mihawk went to find Shanks after the rivalry ended, not because there was anything left to fight about, but because Shanks was the only person in the world he had ever been close to, and he did not know what to do with the absence of the contest without at least maintaining some version of the relationship. The man who chose absolute solitude, who joined a government institution specifically to be left alone, who has apparently constructed his life around the principle of not needing anyone. That man crosses a sea to hand someone a piece of paper, because there was nowhere else worth going. The deeper structural question is what Mihawk's principle of withdrawal actually means. He stated it explicitly at the time. A one-armed Shanks was not the rival he wanted to fight. The duels between them stopped when Shanks became, in Mihawk's judgment, diminished. The generous interpretation is that this is a form of honor, that Mihawk refuses to fight anyone who cannot bring their full capacity, because the point of a real duel is the real contest, not the verified result. That interpretation makes Mihawk admirable, a man of principle. But let's be honest here, that's probably not the case. If you only fight rivals who are completely matched with you, and you get to define what completely matched means. Mihawk has been the strongest swordsman in the world, partly because he has been very careful about who he decides is qualified to tell him otherwise. The Marineford sequence crystallizes this. When Shanks arrives at the end of the battle, Mihawk does not fight him. He acknowledges, without drama, without visible emotion, in a moment framed as a quiet decision, that fighting Shanks is not something he will attempt that day, and leaves. In a war where he had been fighting with notable ferocity until moments before, is the man who is the strongest swordsman in the world choosing not to confirm it against the one person who would make that confirmation genuinely uncertain? Is the exit from Marineford a principled response, or is it the behavior of a man who has been very careful, for a very long time, about when and whether the test is taken? Anyway, that's beside the point. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. The problem with Mihawk is not that he is lonely. The problem is that he built the loneliness himself, piece by piece, and called it strength. Introduced to us as the literal strongest swordsman in the world, Zoro challenges Mihawk at the Baratie. He has traveled to the Grand Line for exactly this meeting, carried the memory of Kuina, and his promise to become the greatest swordsman in the world and put himself in front of the living definition of that title. Mihawk answers him with a small dagger he wears as a necklace pendant. "I'm not the kind of fool who hunts rabbits with a cannon," he said. Mihawk has evaluated Zoro, determined his current level with the precision his epithet promises, and matched his instrument to the assessment exactly. He is fighting a rabbit with the appropriate instrument for a rabbit. This is, in its own way, a form of deep respect. It is Mihawk taking Zoro's measure seriously enough to respond proportionally, rather than walking away in dismissal. The turn comes when Zoro, losing badly, does something that shifts the structural logic of the fight. He stops blocking. He takes Mihawk's strikes across his body rather than parry with Kuina's sword, the blade of his childhood friend, the physical object that carries her memory and his promise, choosing to absorb damage rather than risk the sword. In that moment, Mihawk puts the pendant away and draws Yoru. Zoro is on the verge of dying. Mihawk upgrades because Zoro has demonstrated something that Mihawk recognizes as deserving of the real blade. The willingness to take damage for a principle rather than betray it. The refusal to protect himself at the cost of the thing he is protecting. That is character. And character, apparently, is the only thing Mihawk has ever been willing to genuinely respond to. This is Mihawk's value system expressed in pure action. He does not care about strength alone. There's only so much strength you can care about once you are the pinnacle of what that word means. He cares about what the strength is for, about whether the person holding the sword has something inside them worth the blade being raised. Zoro proved he does, and Mihawk's response is not mercy. He inflicts the wound anyway, marks Zoro permanently across the chest in a wound he will carry for the rest of the series, but makes a promise. "I will remember your name." Analyze that promise carefully. In a world where Mihawk has apparently nothing left to want, that is one of the most significant things he could offer. He is not promising a future victory. He is not promising a rematch. He is promising continued awareness, that this person will remain in his field of attention. For a man who appears to have found everyone and everything unworthy of sustained interest, that is enormous. That is, possibly, the closest thing to an emotional investment Mihawk makes in the entire first half of the story. The remembered name is something far more rare and far more valuable than either. It is acknowledgement, from the summit, that something is climbing toward it. This brings us to post-Marineford. Bartholomew Kuma scatters the Straw Hat crew to separate locations across the world. Zoro lands on Kuregana Island, Mihawk's home, a dark island whose very name means dark haze. Injured, alone, in the territory of the man who nearly killed him 2 years before. Zoro begs, and gets on his knees for Mihawk to agree to train him. Mihawk says yes. Mihawk ended up training Zoro during the 2-year time skip. Mihawk is bored, not in the casual sense, but in the existential sense. The boredom of a man who has achieved everything available to him in his field, and now has no one and nothing to demonstrate it against. Zoro is not just a student, he is the only person in the world who has publicly, formally declared that he is coming for Mihawk's title, who has made Mihawk his specific, named destination. That is not a threat Mihawk needs to fear. It is a gift. It is the only person in the story currently in motion toward him. Train what threatens you. It is the logic of a man who wants, more than almost anything, to be genuinely challenged, to face something that actually matters, and who understands that the only way that happens at this point is if he personally ensures the challenger becomes as capable as possible. If Zoro reaches Mihawk having been trained by Mihawk, the eventual duel cannot be dismissed. The title transfers honestly. There is nothing arbitrary about it. Everything is controlled, constructed, legitimate. He is in a sad way, building the only thing he has left to care about. He is building a challenger. Mihawk is constructing the one thing he has left to want. A genuine threat. He agreed not out of kindness, but out of the most sophisticated form of self-interest available to a man who has already reached the top. The interest in being genuinely threatened by something he helped create. The Perona dynamic also adds crucial texture to the time skip period. During the 2 years on Kuregana Island, the household consists of Mihawk, Zoro, and Perona, a ghost girl who is, objectively, the least likely companion for the world's strongest swordsman. She is loud, emotional, frequently dramatic, and made the island significantly less quiet than the man who chose it for its emptiness presumably intended. Mihawk tolerates her. More than tolerates. He does not ask her to leave. He does not exile her. He shares his island with her for 2 full years. The man who chose his island for its darkness and its absence of people is cohabiting, apparently peacefully, with a pink-haired ghost enthusiast who is loud about her feelings. This is either evidence that solitude was never the entire point, that what he wanted was not no people, but no people who could hurt him. As of current, Mihawk is one of the founders of Cross Guild. When the Shichibukai system was dissolved following the Reverie, Mihawk was suddenly a free agent with a massive bounty and no institutional protection. Crocodile approached him, Mihawk joined. Together they recruited Buggy, and Cross Guild was born. Cross Guild was founded by Crocodile and Mihawk. Buggy was absorbed into the organization largely due to a debt and a misunderstanding, and through the chaos of the news cycle, emerged as the apparent leader, earning him an emperor title. Mihawk and Crocodile operate as the actual core. The organization inverted the bounty system, placing bounties on marine heads rather than pirate heads, and became one of the most destabilizing forces in the post-Wano world. Now think about this for a moment, because this is unlike everything Mihawk has done since the betrayal. Every decision in his post-rivalry life before Cross Guild was a move toward isolation or self-protection. The Warlord title, purchased for solitude, Kuregana Island, chosen for emptiness, the Coffin Boat, a one-man vessel. Even training Zoro can be read as a project conducted in controlled isolation on his own terms. Cross Guild is different. It is the first voluntary step toward genuine association, toward a collective, toward shared resources and coordinated action, toward operating in tandem with people rather than merely alongside them. So this begs the question, why now? The most pragmatic guess here is straightforward and sufficient. He needed protection from marine pursuit after the Shichibukai dissolution, and Cross Guild provided it while also allowing him to continue the marine hunter work he had never truly abandoned. That explanation holds. At this point in the story, Mihawk is closer to genuine engagement with the world than he has been since before the betrayal. He has trained a student. He has maintained, however minimally, his connection to Shanks. The isolation that defined 2 decades of his post-rivalry life is, slowly, and without any announcement or dramatic moment, beginning to dissolve. The Cross Guild bounty system is also worth unpacking as an expression of his specific grudge, a direct attack on the institution he spent years as marine hunter, already targeting, now executed with organizational resources rather than individual force. The methods are different, but the direction is exactly the same. Mihawk's sword is named Yoru, Knight in Japanese. A black blade at supreme grade level, classified among the 12 Saijo Owazamono, the highest rank of swords in the series. A black blade is not manufactured black. It becomes black through a process of sustained haki infusion over years and decades of combat. The wielder forces their haki into the metal so consistently and so deeply that the blade itself changes color permanently. The darkness is not a quality of the material. It is the accumulated record of everything the wielder has poured into it. Yoru is black because Mihawk has been doing this for decades. The sword is, in the most literal sense the series allows, a physical record of who he is. Every fight, every infusion of will and intent, every act of sustained mastery built into the metal until the metal remembered. The sword is not a symbol of Mihawk's power. It is evidence of his investment, the one thing he has poured himself into without reservation or withdrawal. He may not trust people. He may not trust institutions. He does not appear to trust much of anything that can decide to betray him. But he trusts the sword, with his accumulated self, for long enough to turn it into something nobody else has managed to achieve with a blade of this classification. Yoru is shaped like a crucifix. The largest, most powerful weapon in the story is shaped like an instrument of suffering. His pendant knife echoes that religious geometry. There is no victory in the design. There is weight. There is a burden. The thing Mihawk carries on his back, the proof of his achievement, the physical manifestation of everything he reached, is shaped like the object associated with suffering and martyrdom across the cultures Oda is clearly drawing from. Mihawk's aesthetic is gothic because his greatness is framed as weight. The thing that proves his supremacy also resembles an instrument of suffering. He does not merely wield his achievement. He carries it. He has reached the summit, and the summit is a cross he carries everywhere he goes. But more than this, he also sails on a boat which literally resembles a coffin. A tiny vessel, black, shaped like a coffin, with a cross-shaped mast, one-man capacity, candles burning at the edges with green fire. He travels through a world of massive fleet ships and emperor-class vessels in something that looks like a funeral object. This is, at some level, a man who has been treating his existence since the rivalry ended as a kind of slow transit, a crossing between the life that meant something and whatever comes next, and who built a boat to match that feeling. He is not sailing anywhere purposefully. He is waiting in motion. And the cherry on top here are his eyes, hawk eyes. His epithet describes his eyes specifically, the golden yellow hawk-like irises that can perceive things at distances, and with clarity unavailable to ordinary people. The hawk sees everything. The hawk watches from altitude. The hawk does not descend unless it has already chosen its target, and the choice is already made before the movement begins. And this is exactly Mihawk. He observes the world from a position of total clarity, decides what is worth engaging with, and acts only when the decision is already made. He has watched everything. He has seen the entire board. And he has been waiting, from altitude, for the one thing that would make the descent feel worthwhile. For Zoro, world's strongest swordsman is a direction. For Mihawk, it is a locked room. Zoro can measure every sacrifice against the name Mihawk. He can fail and still know where to go. Mihawk has no equivalent. There is no name above his. There is no horizon beyond the horizon he already reached. That is why dominance cannot be what Mihawk wants. He already has dominance and appears unmoved by it. Recognition cannot be what he wants either. He does not perform for crowds, gather followers, rule territory, or accumulate treasure. Solitude is not quite the answer either. If he wanted pure solitude, he would not visit Shanks. He would not train Zoro. He would not tolerate Perona. He would not join Cross Guild. He would disappear into the kind of remoteness even Marines could not find. What Mihawk wants is worthy opposition. He wants someone whose existence makes his title unstable again. He wants the feeling Shanks once gave him. Not the certainty of superiority, but the risk of being answered. And because One Piece is a story about inherited will, the only candidate who can truly do that is Zoro. This is where Mihawk's training of Zoro becomes almost selfish. It is generous on the surface, yes. It helps Zoro. It helps Luffy. It helps the future Pirate King's crew. But psychologically, Mihawk is also building the only thing left that can save him from the emptiness of completion. He is constructing his own endgame. If Zoro reaches Mihawk undertrained, the duel means nothing. If Zoro reaches Mihawk as the swordsman Mihawk himself helped shape, the duel becomes pure. No excuses, no asterisks, just the title, the student, the blade, and the question Mihawk has spent years waiting for someone to ask properly. Can you take this from me? And underneath that, the more frightening question, can you free me from it? And this brings us to the anomaly. Mihawk cannot be categorized cleanly because he refuses almost every normal structure of power in One Piece. The admirals serve the marines. The emperors command crews, territories, and political gravity. The Revolutionary Army exists as ideology made military. Blackbeard accumulates, crocodile schemes. Shanks balances patience and intervention. Even retired legends remain defined by affiliations and histories. Mihawk affiliates with nothing except the sword. His warlord membership was minimal and transactional. His cross-guild membership is practical and reluctant. His home is isolated. His relationships are few and strange. He trains the first mate of a rising emperor and appears untroubled by the consequences. He refuses to fight Shanks when the opportunity appears. He does not announce a dream. He does not chase the One Piece. This makes him dangerous in a different way from the other monsters. Blackbeard is a force. Shanks is inevitable. Akainu is institutional violence. Mihawk is dangerous because he is independent. He is not a piece in anyone else's game unless he decides the game is convenient. The world government borrowed his strength, but never owned him. Crocodile partners with him, but does not command him. Buggy benefits from him by accident. Zoro learns from him, but does not domesticate him. Mihawk watches, Mihawk waits. Mihawk acts only when the target has become worth descending for. That is why Final Saga Mihawk feels so volatile despite doing relatively little. Cross Guild has inverted the bounty system. Buggy has declared for the One Piece. Crocodile's ambitions are awake again. And in the middle stands the most self-contained top-tier fighter in the world. A man with a marine grudge, a student on the rise, and no ideological leash. What cannot be debated here is that Zoro will beat Mihawk, since that is basically the entire narrative that drives Zoro forward. Mihawk must lose, because his entire character has been organized around the unbearable emptiness of a completed dream. The most satisfying ending for him is release. Zoro has to win, because Zoro's promise demands it. But for Mihawk, defeat at Zoro's hands is not the collapse of his character. It is the resolution of the problem his character introduced. He reached the summit and found it empty. Zoro climbing to meet him is the answer. There are other possibilities, but I don't think they are worth bringing up. What stands is that Mihawk and Zoro have to fight because Zoro is the only person who can make Mihawk's height feel real again. But I do think Mihawk wants the possibility of defeat, because a worthy defeat is the only experience left that can prove the title was not merely a tomb. Imagine the emotional reversal. Zoro spends the entire story trying to reach the man at the top. Mihawk spends the entire story waiting for someone to make the top less lonely. When Zoro wins, he gains the title. Mihawk loses the burden. Zoro arrives. Mihawk finally descends. Rather than a reduction of Mihawk, it is the completion of him. The man who has already won needs to lose in exactly the right way. Mihawk crystallizes one of One Piece's most quietly adult ideas about greatness. Achieving the thing is not the same as being fulfilled by it. This is a terrifying idea in a series built on dreams. One Piece usually treats dreams as engines of life. Luffy's dream makes the world bigger. Zoro's promise gives pain a direction. The Straw Hat's dreams do not shrink them. They animate them. Mihawk is what happens after the dream is complete. He is not proof that dreams are meaningless. He is proof that the chase contains something the achievement cannot preserve by itself. Once Mihawk reached the horizon, he discovered that the summit did not automatically produce life. So he built one out of distance, a castle, a coffin boat, a cross-shaped sword, a warlord contract for peace, a rivalry preserved by refusal, a student trained to become a threat, a criminal guild joined because even solitude has logistics. Piece by piece, Mihawk constructed a life that looks like strength from the outside and sounds, if you listen closely, like waiting. Mihawk losing to Zoro sounds extremely satisfying, only if the story treats it not as a power-scaling receipt, but as a human event. The point is that Zoro becomes worthy enough to answer Mihawk's deepest, least spoken desire. Show me that the summit can still be challenged. Show me that someone was climbing while I was standing still. Mihawk is not lonely in the simple way. He is lonely the way a summit is lonely. He is lonely because everything below him still has direction, and he has only height. He is the image of a man who arrived. And when he got there was no one waiting.